Welcome to the Future of Reality, Futurist Writers Room. My name is Robert Sinclair. I'm a member of the Guild of Future Architects and one of the original members of the Futurist Writers Room. We run long form and short form writers rooms live. We used to do, and then we went to Zoom. We've curated a very specific experience. We've done Google Creative Lab, Rockefeller Future of Foods, Doris Duke Foundation, Pop Culture Collaborative. We had a piece in Sundance this last year, traveling the interstitium with Octavia Butler, and on and on. It's very fun, rewarding work. I will be one of your facilitators for this experience. We will reimagine the future of reality. One of our founders, Sharon Chang, likes to say that we like to imagine the past and remember the future. That hopefully will make sense after this, after we finished. But I will start by introducing my co-facilitator, who I cannot tell you how brilliant this person is, Jessica Clark. She's the director of the Guild of Future Architects News Initiative, the director of media strategy forecasting firm Dot Connector Studio, and a journalist for more than 20 years. I think we thought 25 is actually correct, right, Jessica?
Yep, getting up there.
So yeah, Jessica, please.
Thanks, Rob. So it's been a long week, probably for a lot of you, and a long year so far, and a long 5 years for most of us. So hopefully we'll bring a little bit of light and levity into your week to close it out, and then you'll be able to sort of go into your weekend in a fun mood. So as Rob said, I'm the director of the New News Initiative. I'll put a link in the chat. This is a new project funded by the Ford Foundation at the Guild of Future Architects. The Guild is not a bunch of people who want to build buildings. It's people who want to architect the future. It's interdisciplinary and it is mission driven. So we think the world should be more just, more collaborative, and more beautiful. And by beautiful, we mean more harmonious for all of us, among other things, and also prettier, but we don't just mean pretty. So I wanted to bring into this conversation two other practitioners who have been thinking quite a bit about media in the future. I'm going to ask each of them, Kareem Ahmed and Alicia Bell, to introduce themselves and to tell us a little bit about the reports that they've been working on that use futurist strategies. And then we're going to all launch into the writer's room. Kareem, you want to start?
Sure. Thanks, Jessica. Thanks, Rob. I'm always super excited to go back into the Futurist Writers Room. So as Jessica said, my name is Kareem Ahmed. I'm a writer and a culture strategist and a member of the Guild. And I also oversee the Outreach and Inclusion program at the Sundance Institute. Over the last year and a half or so, I feel like my work at Sundance and my work within the Guild has sort of merged in a really meaningful way where particularly at the beginning of the pandemic, I and a lot of the other organizations that I work with in my role at Sundance are basically artist support nonprofits that are supporting specific groups of historically marginalized communities and artists from those communities, where we all understandably, like a lot of us, we're in a place of really just trying to understand and mitigate harm amongst our communities and figure out what are the ways that we can sort of recenter restorative practices in what we're doing in the immediate to support artists within our communities, but also what are the ways that artist support nonprofits can more deeply engage in systems redesign and future architecture to design, much like Rob and Jessica were just alluding to, a radically aspirational future for our media arts system and all the different sectors within it that really uphold justice and beauty as core design principles, and not the framework of equity that we're so used to sort of looking at as the goal for what we're doing, but not looking at equity, which is sort of base survival, and instead really looking at beauty or thrival as the goal that we're trying to design for. And so how do we design a system that, was not, how do we redesign a system that was originally not designed for any of us, with all of us at the center, in order to maximize beauty and restoration and regenerative practices across all of the work that we're doing in support of artists. So we brought in the methodology of the Futurist Writers Room to work with those organizations to collectively build that future and map out what are some of the characteristics of that future as a foundation upon which to expand collaborations with a lot of other organizations and really invested individuals and folks like yourselves to continue to add shape and scope to those visions, but also to actually build it. That culminated in a report, which I authored, which exists on restoringthefuture.org. Restoring the Future is the name of the report, and it's sort of a foundation for that work moving forward. And we're sort of engaged now in a process of sort of advocacy and engagement with other sort of partner organizations and going through a process of prototyping some of the things that are called for within the provocations of that report. So excited to see where there's overlap between this work and that work, and excited to be here with all of you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Alicia?
Hey y'all, my name is Alicia Bell. I use they and she pronouns, and I am one of the co-creators of a project and co-writers of an essay called Media 2070. And I'll drop the link to that here in the chat for y'all. So Media 2070 came to exist a few years ago when I and others at Free Press, which is a national media and technology advocacy organization, we're doing work in communities with community members, non-journalists, who were trying to figure out what building relationships meant, and what it meant to have community power as an equitable partnership with journalists and with the creation of news and information. And in so much of that work, it just kept coming up that for Black and Brown folks, there was an absence of relationship with a lot of news and a lot of journalism, especially at a national level, especially legacy news and journalism. And these same patterns were coming up all over the kind of media and technology landscape. So it was not just in journalism, but it was also in regards to social media platforms, and also in regards to internet infrastructure, and also in regards to just the future of the internet. These same kind of lack of relationship and access and feeling felt and seen and held by these spaces was existing. And so I and Joseph Torres and Colette Watson and Tahit Chappelle and Diamond Hardiman and Christina Pierce came together, and we started really excavating at what is this and why, and digging back into the history of what created this, because we knew it didn't come out of nowhere. And we had some kind of ideas that it was because of a history, and really delving into that could just thread and pull the ways in which journalism, media, and technology were never meant to serve us, were never meant to serve Black communities, were made in such a way that they upheld a white supremacist racial hierarchy. And so as we kind of threaded from that history in the United States specifically back to chattel slavery up until now, it became really abundantly clear that there was a need for reparations in media, for media reparations, for a reparative media system that could serve us all, because it had never existed. And so the Media 2070 essay is an essay that covers some of that history. It talks a little bit about the present moment, and then and leaves with questions about what's possible in the future. And so the ways that we've been living into those questions is by hosting some of these future creation spaces, envisioning and dreaming spaces with folks, and lifting up what else is possible. And the reason the project is called Media 2070, that the essay was called Media 2070, is because what we found is that starting back in 1920, these same calls have been made every 50 years. And then even looking further than that, back to the 1870s, 1860s, that's when we saw some of those calls being made around some of the early Black newspapers and gatherings that were happening, right? So every 50 years, this kind of reckoning comes up around media, around the role of media in perpetuating racial violence. And in 2020, we were ready to be like, how do we not have this conversation in another 50 years? How can we be somewhere else by the time we get to 2070 so that this conversation is old hat? And we're in a future that is a lot more generative, a lot more beautiful, like you were saying, Kareem, a lot more restorative, where we don't expect that no one will experience harm, but that we're in the practice of repair and the practice of reconciliation, and we're able to be a little bit more buoyant in that work. And so I'm excited to be here with y'all today. I am carrying that work into my current role as the director of the Racial Equity and Journalism Fund at Borealis Philanthropy, to figure out if this can be a way that we fund some of these futures and fund some of the parts of it. So excited to be here and be a part of this.
Beautiful, beautiful.
So
All right,
before we
so-
go into the mural, I just want to say one more thing, and we couldn't do this without mentioning Kamal Sinclair, who it has helped to create this Futurist Writers Room format. It happens to be Rob's sister, and who I co-authored the Making a New Reality report with. The link is in the chat, and she was at Sundance at the time, so it's all a big happy circle. And now we're going to talk about the future of reality. Rob, take it away.
Yeah, actually, I'd love to go off about sort of how these organizations, individuals, like that big white circle functions in terms of principles, and it's very different than other organizations and like older systems of connection. And I was talking to someone yesterday about that. It's really beautiful. But we are now going to sort of workshop a Futurist Writers Room live with all of you. This is similar to, God, we've done dozens and dozens of these over the past year, and every one of them is fascinating and the outcomes are amazing. So I'm going to invite you all to click on the link I just put in the chat that says mural. It's a visitor's link. You should be all be able to get in. And I would like everyone also to come off of mute if possible. And then let me know if that link doesn't work for anyone. Should work. Kareem, worked for you, everyone?
It works.
Okay, we're all good. All right, I'm gonna screen share a little bit here. Let's go with this. All right. Can everyone see my screen, my crazy screen here?
Yes.
Yes. All right. See all those windows and everything. See how crazy I am. All right, let's make that bigger. Okay, so this is what everyone's coming into. This is our whiteboard for our alternative history and aspirational future. We're going to rethink reality and rethink media, and we're going to create together. Here's our process over here to the left. We're going to start with an inflection point. We're going to pivot and change what actually happened in the past. And then we're going to come to our new 2021, which it should be, and we're going to see what happens. That's the beginning of this exercise, and it's that simple. Now we're going to get to work. So I'm hoping everyone's off of mute. Can I hear some voices just to know if everyone can be heard, if everyone can speak? Don't be shy. Oh, there we go. Okay, beautiful, beautiful. All right, so now that we're all into our mural, we're going to go up to the section. Where's our mural here? There it is. All right. We're going to go to the section that says inflection point. Let's pull it up real quick here. The mural disappeared on me. There it is. There we go. Okay, where it says alternative history and inflection point, right in this area. You can zoom in with 2 fingers or zoom out. And you can click on these little cards and type away whatever you want. Not yet, but that's just to let you know this is where we're going to put our ideas about the past. Now, this is called an inflection point. We're going to focus on the early promise of citizen journalism pre-social media. So we're going to travel all the way back to the early 2000s The idea that one day the widespread use of internet technologies would lead to a democratization of media and an end to the dominating control of the elite outlets, right? I'm going to work from about 2001. So when everyone just to sort of mentally time travel back to that time, right, in the journalism world. And this was just the beginning of participatory journalism in terms of like it being promised to be widespread. And this is the rise of events like the protest in Seattle. The internet is gaining adoption, but smartphones are not yet really a thing. Newspapers, cable news, talk radio are dominating the landscape, all right? And here is our primary core question right here. Journalism and documentary are both technologies of capturing and interrogating the real. How could we have changed the ways in which we represented and communicated reality 20 years ago to head off the current crisis of hyperpartisanship and misinformation today? That's the idea.
Oh, so sorry. One of the guests is having trouble logging in to the website.
To the mural?
To the mural? Is it not? It's desktop only, I assume.
It is. It should work for. It should work. Let me see if I can.
Okay. You're saying the iPad is not working.
Oh, it may be tougher on an iPad.
So Heidi, if you want to just say things in response to the prompts, we can type them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or you can put it in the chat and we can try and drag them over. Okay, so I want everyone to pick out a card. Just click on a card and that'll be yours, right? Once you've clicked on it, no one else can touch it. And think about that core question, right? And think of an inflection point, something that we could have done as a society, that we could have changed, that could have happened, or that maybe did happen but happened differently. Think from an aspirational standpoint. Just if you could have your druthers, which is the word I use, if you could have changed anything about the development of citizen journalism and the internet in general, policies, right? Laws, rules, social changes in the social contract, anything that sort of you've thought about or would have liked to change, the way platforms like Facebook developed, like the ethics behind that, the laws governing that, right? Events, anything that could have changed where we've ended up today, where, you know, social media is basically molesting our children to some extent. And what do you call it? Hyperpartisanship is misinformation is the lay of the land, where conspiracy theory capitalism is running everything right now. Okay, I see we're into it. Oh, this is beautiful. Oh, this is beautiful. Okay. Have fun with this too. Remember, this is not to try to game out exactly how this could have worked. This is just something that makes you happy to think about in terms of changing where we are at today, right? Here's a couple of follow-up. I mean, you obviously don't need any help. Everyone seems to be populating these cards fairly well. But here's some follow-up prompts to think about. How could the early democratic promise of the internet have led us to a more pluralistic yet respectful media environment that supports safe spaces for stories and cultural abundance, right? You know, right now that's not the case, right? What are some ways that could have changed over the last 20 years? What policies could have been enacted to protect the media landscape today from malicious algorithms and conspiracy theory capitalism, right? That's policies, that's laws, that's rules, right? Business practices. Let's get a couple more of these, just a couple more. We're good on time so far. What cultural events or mainstream revelations could have shifted us away from the outrage industries spread to social media, right? Right now, our brain stems are being hacked. And the way we do that is by outrage journalism, right? It spreads easier than good information and facts. Okay, we've got some interesting ones here. I'm gonna read off a few. Newspapers never made their content free. Was that one of our team, or did someone in one of our participants write that?
That was me.
It was you. Internet regulated like a public utility. That one's interesting. Net neutrality guarded, right? Can anyone who's one of our participants that is facilitating a card or sees a card that they like, could you speak up and read that card out loud if you don't mind? Anyone at all who's joining us?
I think there's a lot of really awesome stuff on here. I think the process of thinking through this particular time period was really interesting and really really generative for me, because I mean, I remember this time like really clearly, and particularly in relation to different initiatives around citizen journalism. And I remember being personally really involved in in the Bay Area, like the Indie Media Center. And to me, that is such a quintessential manifestation of citizen journalism, but they're also, these sort of chronically unfunded organizations and underfunded organizations. And when you look at sort of where public dollars or philanthropic dollars are moved towards, is there the potential for a model of, more funding being directed towards citizen journalism outlets like that? How would that potentially shift things? The other thing that I was sort of really thinking about, which is kind of undeniable in this period, right, is just the news coverage of 9/11. And, when I think about inflection points, I think a lot about these sort of what are the big events that force society to shift its thinking in different ways, because those are so often what is required to make these paradigm shifts. And it just made me wonder, what if coverage of, or sort of traditional journalism coverage of something as foundational as that was, it sort of shifted public opinion or public trust away from commercial journalism and towards more of these sort of citizen journalism outlets like independent media centers. And so those are some of the things that just kind of come up for me personally based on just sort of lived experience around this time.
So I'm gonna, just to give you an idea of some of this, just get this in your head, just sort of put yourself there, right? So what if 20 or so years ago, Facebook was set up to work in tandem with local journalists and governments instead of anonymous oligarchy? Also never created the dislike button, right? So what if that never existed, right? What if influencing didn't exist in the way that it does now, and it was more responsible, right? What if net neutrality was guaranteed 20 years ago? How would that change where we are today? Jessica, you want to read a couple of these before we move on to our next section? We're doing good on time.
Yeah, so we've got a call for public education mandates for media literacy. So maybe people 20 years ago would have been educated, so they would be much more literate now and from moving forward. Philanthropic investment in any media centers, like Kareem mentioned. What if the people who were editorial producers and editorial boards were genuinely diverse instead of being a majority white in foundations and the gatekeeping stations? Heidi, do you want to read this one that I pasted in?
I can't see it.
Oh, but you put it in, didn't you put it in the chat?
The
Internet
rural-urban divide still exists. You have no connectivity in parts of America that are dying, parts of the world that aren't developed. Until we have a backbone that supports us all, we aren't an equal society in any way.
Right. Okay. So yeah, what if that had become a priority and the information superhighway had really been more of a set of interconnecting information roads throughout the United States?
I'm part of the Marshall McLuhan generation of journalism, that for people to be consuming television and not being able to make television, to consume media and not make media, is like being taught to read without being taught to write.
Right. Great.
A blast from the past.
A blast from the past. Beautiful.
We're in the past. It's perfect.
We are in the past. Perfect. Okay, so now we're going to leave our past here, looking at these cards. Al Gore TV was a huge hit. Oh, that's funny. Now we're going to move down to number 2, where Jess's name is in the left corner in a little dot, and we're going to move to our present state. This is going to be our alternate 2021. This is today, but this is the today that was created as a result of these inflection points happening over the last 20 years. Jess?
Hold your card in your mind and imagine us now. Some of our core questions are in our alternative present based on that inflection point. How has the promise of citizen journalism changed or delivered? How does policy shape the platforms that now are the primary portal to journalism, i.e. Facebook, TikTok, Twitter? How is journalism itself not just reporting on reality, but changing it? And what is the current state of truth in our alternate 2021? And I've got some follow-up prompts, but I'll hold them for a minute until you get a chance to ponder that and think about what you wish we had instead of what we got.
While folks are putting stuff in the board, can I just uplift one more thing from our inflection point section that I think is super generative for the current present state, which is the 6-hour, 4-day work week being normalized. I think that's huge. And I think that particularly when you think about what could, if that happened in the early 2000s, what would that foster 20 years later where we are right now, where the citizen journalists that are actually the ones that are going out and creating this reportage are are a more culturally diverse group of folks, and as opposed to just the folks that can afford to not be working on a particular day to go out and be a citizen journalist covering a particular thing, but how does something as universal as a shorter work day, a shorter work week actually incentivize a broader cross-section of society to actually be more civically engaged through journalism? I feel like that's huge. I love the implications of that.
Great, that's perfect. So
but that's my favorite so far.
So we'll let some people get their thoughts in, and let me have a thought for a minute. What do I wish had happened?
I mean, the obvious is Fox News would not exist. Wouldn't that be?
Wouldn't that be a relief? Of course, we've got OAN,
it would.
so
It would.
we can't
Yeah.
win.
Tucker Carlson would be a failed kindergarten teacher. They would have been like, "No, man, you're out of here. Not doing it."
Do that to those kids.
That's why he got fired. That's why he got fired. That's why he didn't make it as a kindergarten teacher.
So we've got some prompts. How are politicians adjusting to a robust and democratized journalistic field?
In 2021.
In our alternate 21. How are BIPOC narratives and movements such as Black Lives Matter being covered? And how is our history of colonialism being internalized by the media and then framed for the general public?
Science-driven standard on effects of screen time in kids. Yeah, that seems
starting to see that.
Yeah. Ranked choice probably wouldn't exist, right? The social media platforms, if they did install ranked choice, would be responsible for the damage they did by ranking things instead of just saying, "Hey, man, it's just content. We're making money off of it, but we don't control it," right? Oh, these are good.
Or the Federal Reparations Commission. Nice.
Oh.
All right. We got to get a little crazier, I think.
Yeah. Get those out of the way and then just go nuts. Are there any of these our advisors particularly have their eye on? As one of my other co-Futurist Writers Room, people would have said, which ones are juicy to you? That's what Aisha would say.
One of the things that I'm super curious about is this piece around gatekeepers being more diverse. I when I think about that, I wonder if like some of those inflection points had happened, what gatekeeping would look like. What would that even mean today? Would there be the same kind of gatekeeping that we have now? Would we have more cooperative structures, media structures? And when I think about the future of especially Black and Indigenous leadership and media, I think about how to quantify that if we have more cooperative media anyway. Right now, it's really easy to quantify and measure because it's such a hierarchical kind of top-down structure. But I imagine that in the future and in the current state, if like some of these inflection points had happened, if we already had a more public media and a more cooperativized media, I imagine tracking leadership and the existence of Black and Indigenous people in it would be something we'd be trying to figure out how to quantify.
Well, I mean, how do you quantify things? With quotas, with self-volunteered information, with content analysis and name analysis, which is a really terrible way to quantify to anything. So how could that, like, AI driven diversity targets across all media outlets
This is
regulated by the FCC?
this
Yeah,
is
Wow.
this is more. I'm wondering if I mean in this scenario, like, would we need to quantify it? I don't know.
well, you count what
Yeah, I
counts, right?
Yeah, this AI-driven diversity target. I mean, so now we're looking at algorithms or companies even or individuals were optimizing for something different, right? Just changing what something optimizes for completely transforms how we view truth. This one's interesting too, which we haven't gotten into this, but we're going to move on in a minute. This is the past is sort of our test so we can create the future, which is sort of the more interesting, funner part. But although I'm more of a historian, so I love changing the past, it's very therapeutic. Our trust in truth may have allowed us to respond to COVID differently, right? So in this alternate 2021, there's probably not a QAnon, there's probably not as much anti-vax propaganda or anti-vax capitalism because many of the major influencers who are pushing anti-vax don't really believe it. Most of them are vaccinated, right? It's just that that's how they get people to interact. It's just sort of a capitalistic, thing. So that's really interesting, right? Where would COVID be? America's, the United States we're focusing on in relation to COVID, how would that be differently if we had a more universal idea of what truth was or a more idea of truth as being part of the commons, right? So this is our alternative history we've created here. By creating this inflection point, we've moved to our present state and we've created a present state where cooperative media gatekeeping is different. Everyone is issued a media guide to help them parse facts, and it's not disputed. Universal basic income is instituted. Why not? Universal internet access is normalized, as is normal as cell phone lines. Science-driven standards on effects of screen time in kids. So we don't have this generation who has, one of the most battered in terms of mental health outcomes in generations. And this is a much better present state than the one we have today, right? So now we're going to move over to 3. Everyone, if you can, just shift over here to our green cards right here. No pun intended, please. But our green cards right here. And we're going to begin this process again, only this time we're going to change our future, starting with our present state. And we're going to begin with this current inflection point that we're all in right now. Just sitting here or standing or wherever you are, interacting with us right now. Looking at the disproportionate distribution of the negative effects of COVID, the misinformation campaigns against vaccines that we're all dealing with, the damage of social media on an entire generation of youth, the rise of groups like QAnon and the Capitol riot spurred by conspiracy theory capitalism, and the reckoning of the history of colonialism and racism that the media often propagated, and the clear damage of the assault on truth caused by all of this, right? Truth itself is sort of ripping apart as we retreat to our bubbles. With all of that in mind, and everything else that you're sort of dealing with or thinking about, and we are as a community, here's our core question before we start these cards. Using this moment or this yearning for change, right? It's become clear to most people that we cannot continue along this path. So using that yearning right now that people are feeling, folks are feeling, how could we shift towards a more pluralistic and democratized media landscape where truth and information are viewed as we view air and water, as a common resource to be protected from the pollutants of misinformation, hate speech, and systematic racism? So this is starting today. What are some of the things as a society, if you could just sort of almost wave a magic wand, right, and sort of shift what's happening, what are some of the things that could be implemented? This could be in terms of social media, in terms of truth in general. This could be new policies that people support but are not being passed. This could be social movements being adopted or created, right? Just anything right now that you feel would be a solution to this problem, or some of these problems of the fracturing of truth, misinformation, right? Which is fracturing society here and around the world. This is not exclusive to the United States at this point, right? Facebook is facilitating unrest around the world in many ways, and misinformation is spreading far beyond our borders, right? So if we could take right now the anxiety that we all feel, and for years we'll be studying this and collecting data on this, right? The Gen Z, imagine Gen Z coming into their own, right? Becoming adults and looking back and realizing how badly their parents, me for instance, sort of messed up COVID and the effect that had on them, and they're yearning to change. What would they do, right? There's a few follow-up prompts I'll read in just a minute to see if we're going here.
So we've
And
got
again,
a
this
note
is
from
just-
Heidi about linear thinking and line type to visual endless stimulation is the future generation gap. Heidi, do you want to reframe that as an inflection point? So something that would happen that would change that in the moment?
Well, I'm seeing a big divide between people in the Gutenberg era to the present of sequential thought, one thought after another, one word after another, to the bombardment, the complete bombardment visually and stimulating that is not conducive to thought. I see this as a big divide.
So how could we remedy that now? How could we go back and fill in the gaps now in order to create a counterpoint?
Again, a universal access to the means of producing information and expression. Okay. My dream is satellite internet connectivity. And I think that's very important to even the playing field.
Right, cool. Go ahead, Rob, with the prompts.
Oh yeah, so here's some additional sort of prompts to think about while you're thinking, what could we as a society do now? What role is documentary playing in addressing issues of misinformation and how we might change that, right? Like right now. The journalism business models are in a death spiral, right? What could we do to pull them out without compromising quality or equity in news? And just what new policies could we adopt, right? What could we change? Incentive-based, what incentives could we change that would shift what companies are allowed to do, what we're allowed to do, what we're allowed to optimize for in the future, right? This could have to do with our personal data, right? Like what laws around data mining, policies around that could come up. What institutional support could we gain? These are really fun.
Also, just like, how are we going to be consuming news? What's it going to look like? What's it going to smell like? What's it going to feel like? Did I jump the gun on that one? That might be the next.
Little bit, but it's okay. It's okay. Universal access to means of production expression, linear thinking, line type, to visual.
That's the one
yeah. That's, I was reading because that's yeah. So yeah, the boredom is being assaulted, right? Kids aren't being allowed, people aren't being allowed to just sit around and imagine things and, you know, allow ideas to float in and out of their head, because that is a space that is being commodified more and more and more, your attention, right? It's the new addiction, right? Stimulation. What if that was mitigated for? Public pressure on social media platforms to default to minimizing notifications and other distractions. Use to just control information. I would argue public pressure, I would argue, like, you know, laws are passed, right? What if we did a speculative future where the social media barons, we called them, were on trial in 10 years for hacking kids' self-esteem as a business model, right? Much like the pharmaceutical companies are dealing with right now, right? What if that changed? Mandate screenless hours. That's dope. Excuse me, I'm from the hip hop generation. Screen time siestas, right? That's became like a normal public thing. That's great.
I like that. Good. That's good branding.
Yeah, it is, right? Outlaw the endless scroll. I love it. Go ahead, please.
Oh no, I was gonna say I really love this this community benefits agreement for media organizations. And part of what I love about it is that it is already happening in some places. There's an organization up in Chicago City Bureau who has kind of prototyped this community contract with news, where they've worked with a lot of community members and citizens and organizations to create that community contract. So it also, like, not only is it exciting, but it's something that feels really possible and already prototyped. And that feels really exciting to me.
Cool. I'm going to put that in our references down
Yeah,
on the
please.
lower right.
Kareem, what's juicy to you? What's going on? Jump in here. Read one off. Give us some of that thought.
That juiciness.
I'm really into sort of some of these reinventions around social platforms, like outlawing algorithmic social feeds, and building in fact-checking layers across some of these platforms. It feels like so much about reconceiving journalism is also just kind of about reconceiving, I mean, to your point previously, Rob, about social media barons being put on trial. I mean, so much of this is sort of centered around sort of what are the ways that news is discovered and what are ways that echo chambers are created. So it's like, it feels like it's so much in this like media literacy and like regulation of social media spaces to me, that I find really exciting. I also like, I will always love any call out to, you know, defund PBS and redirect that money towards more equitable organizations. As someone that worked within the public media system for a long time, that's one of my fantasies, is to see that huge cache of Corporation for Public Broadcasting money go somewhere else.
Sarah, was there anything from your metaverse panel that you think could change, given the moment we're in, where everybody's suddenly talking about the metaverse?
I don't know exactly how. I mean, if we could capture this moment and keep it, actually, where a lot of people are going into these virtual worlds and creating their own worlds and, you know, sort of the way they want them. Violetta gave a wonderful example yesterday. You know, she creates her own art gallery and brings in people, you know, in art that she wants to curate. So it's in the hands of the artists, the ownership and the funds.
Mm-hmm.
And I think yesterday we were trying to get at how could you bring more, you know, BIPOC just communities into the metaverse now to shape how it will be.
Yeah, Sarah and I co-founded Immerse, and Immerse is doing Immerse.news is doing a session, an issue and these sessions on making the metaverse. So we've been playing in the metaverse and thinking and talking about it quite a bit. One of the things that really struck me from that conversation yesterday was about how, what was it? The extinct animals are being 3D scanned.
Yeah.
Or something super creepy about the way that we're like capturing these things that are disappearing in the world. putting them into the virtual world to like be,
To save the physical world when it disappears because we've been scanning it all and ruining the climate.
Right. So that's why I put in this carbon credits for NFTs rerouted into public interest tech. Because if they're
you're watching the money being poured into the metaverse, and it's all coming from these big private corporations, and it's like, where is the government and where are foundations in trying to support local communities creating their worlds in the metaverse? That's just not happening. It's people, grassroots people doing it without funding. And they're doing beautiful things, but they're, how is that sustainable versus these big, Facebook is calling itself the metaverse company, and it's going to try to, create the platform and all the rules for it and how to gain money from it. And it's like, how do we stop that now?
Yep.
And how do we not repeat what happened on the internet? And the metaverse is the moment where we can try that again, because they haven't figured out their models yet.
The metaverse is the moment.
But people aren't stepping up. What?
Nothing, I just thought that sounded good. The metaverse is the moment. Time to switch.
Time to switch, correct. Yeah. Now we're going to move down to our future state, which is the next green area just below R3 down our 4. Jess, take it away.
Okay, I came prepared. But I can't read with these, so that was just for effect. All right, so we're actually 2041. This says 2040, but whatever. You're in the future. Looking at our reflection points above, you can pick one or you can combine a couple. How might news or documentary makers create a more nuanced and pluralistic representation of reality in 2040? If we're all going to be working and playing and eating and sleeping in the metaverse, that will be our reality. So how can we make that more real?
And again, think aspirational, right? You don't have to get into the weeds on it, right? It's just looking at these inflection points and then coming into a future state. How would you imagine a 2040, 2041 that you actually wanted to live in, right? In terms of the media landscape, being in this 2041 and looking back on the turbulent 20s, as I like to call them, right? With relief that you're now in this aspirational 2041. What would it look like, feel like, smell like? Jess, go ahead, drop in what you dropped in earlier. That was a little bit future, yeah.
This is what I want. I just want to know what the future smells like. That's like my guiding question. Hopefully it smells better than the present. This has actually been one of my sort of back room projects is writing an article about every sense and how media can access it, and then thinking about what the sixth sense is. And the sixth sense might be sense of humor, might be sense of outrage, might be sense of your body in space, might be anything. So what are those other sort of more ineffable ways in which media engages us and moves us to action that in the future will be much more literal and sort of baked into the machine? Or maybe it won't be a machine. Maybe we'll have an organic model. Maybe it's like we'll live in a giant virtual brain. Like get wild. We got 20 years here. We've all seen how much can change in 20 years. How are we doing on time, Rob?
We're doing good. We've got another 6 or 7 minutes we can play in here.
Great.
Yeah, we're doing good.
So we have a nice,
discuss. Yeah.
Nice vision. There's homes for all, and neighborhood clusters have a cooperativized broadband network with a stake in a set of pluralistic media platforms. That sounds pretty good. How are people using the news? What are they doing with the news? How is useful news being rewarded? We've also got equitable blockchain economies for nonfiction makers, which is a dream of an NFT utopia. Everyone knows how to dream. Waking or sleeping?
Both. I wrote that, and I was just thinking about some of the conversations I've had with folks in the past few years who have said they don't know how to dream. And so when I think about this future where folks have not only access to imagination and dreaming, but it's something that is just happening so easily.
Alicia, could you talk a little bit about some of the visions that have come up in your Media 2070 process for a better future state?
Yeah, I seeing some of that represented in here, but also some other things that I'm like, how do these get woven in? But some of the things that come up a lot are that there is space to imagine freely, and that there are structures and infrastructure of kind of creative process and making that exists and are institutionalized to make it so that imagining freely is something that's happening. There's a lot of visioning and dreaming around what's on the other side of capitalism. Lots of kind of roots and anti-capitalism and figuring out what that looks like. I think I just pulled up this one vision that came up, and it's something I think about a lot, which was really specific. Then somebody said that there's stories about Black femmes and with flat butts and thin lips and beards and knocking knees. And so I think about that a lot because I think it speaks to some of that, the diversity in what's going on, but also that journalists are not just reporters, but doers and co-creators. And that the institutions are made with that in mind. So those are some of the things I'm feeling a lot of synergy with, some of the other things being lifted up in here.
Cool. Kareem, how about you from your report and your process?
A lot of the things that I'm seeing here around sort of reinvention or development of new sort of collaborative distribution models and reinventing the ways that folks who are creating this work are able to sustain themselves. I think I have a colleague who's worked in the nonfiction space for a long time that has basically said that, like, if you're going to be a documentary maker, you're essentially you've got a life ahead of you of applying for poverty. And so it makes me again sort of think about, like, to what degree are we allowing those who, if we're trying to, again, this is sort of in the similar spaces, like sort of like reinventing the work week and the workday to the point where you're actually making it sustainable for a wider cross section of society to participate in the making of nonfiction material, whether it's journalism or documentary films. What are the ways that those artists are able to be financially sustainable, and then to what degree are those folks able to more equitably develop audience, again, sort of in this space of like dismantling the idea of what is a gatekeeper, and how do you think through, sort of how do you rethink these sort of corporate distribution models and that have very sort of strict bottlenecks in terms of what makes it through, and how do you create more decentralized, collaborative owned distribution models that allow for other sort of qualitative metrics in terms of success, so that success is not sort of measured on a scale of millions, but is measured on a more qualitative scale for the benefit of the commons in different ways.
Right. Yeah, I talk about that a lot. Great. Anyone else want to read one of their ideas aloud before we move on to creating some artifacts that will begin to bring these possibilities into focus? No? Rob, anything calling you?
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, this is really interesting. A living wage for nonfiction media makers is huge. I like the idea of media makers as essential workers, just in general, right? That in some way they're legislated or designed to be have different incentives to what they do. They're like, it isn't a life of poverty to be a media maker. It's looked at as as an essential worker to protect our information stream, our democracy, our world. That's really interesting. Everyone has the uninhibited right to organize a union and strike. That seems like it should be obvious, but I mean, ever since the 1980s, that has been being attacked and attacked and attacked and beat down and beat down and beat down. Yeah, there's some really great ones here. Useful news is monetized through upvotes. Ideas like that are really great, right? So that by 2041, it's not just what is the most exciting right? Or what is the sugariest information? It's like, what is the most useful to society information, right? It's kind of like a different way of rethinking work in general. It's, you know, it's more than just money in terms of like, how does it serve the community in multiple ways? Like what sort of, not just money, but sort of value does it give to society, right? It's really interesting. Okay, so now we're gonna move down. We're right on time here, this is beautiful. To our artifacts, and we're gonna create some artifacts. Jess, do you wanna start this one or should I?
Yeah, so an artifact could be a tangible object, could be a new kind of camera or a new kind of headset, could be a bill, it could be an institution. Whatever it is, it needs to sort of encapsulate the goodness of the inflection point from the, I'm sorry, I've got the wrong title. The future state that we've just discussed. And it needs to make you feel like it's possible, because you can see it and you can feel it. So for example,
go ahead. Yeah. I dragged down just a few from up above. The first flying car, which is not a Tesla. I'm not hating on Teslas. I'm just saying it'd be kind of cool if the first one wasn't a Tesla, right? Okay, maybe I am hating a little bit, but I do like them. They're nice cars. Media reparations bill, that would be considered an artifact, right? This bill that began the media reparations process. Did I spell that right? Media free sleep pods in all workplaces, right? That's an artifact, right? The sleep pod, like the development of them. The misinformation museum is an interesting one, right? Where, you know, I'm not saying this would happen by 2041, but it'd be interesting if the idea of misinformation was very foreign to the current young generation of that time. Like, what is misinformation? Did we really used to do that? You know, like, well, let me explain it to you. It's a concept, it's a thing, right? It's like when they put cocaine in Coca-Cola years and years ago. It's a hard thing for people to really wrap their minds around. It's just a few examples that I sort of pulled down from above. Please, Jess, continue.
Great. So I think the flying cars are cool, but we need the media. We need a media tie-in. So first flying car with fully, you know, that allows you to exist in a fully immersive environment as you communicate.
There you go. There you go. Beautiful.
So we need some thoughts like that. We need a little bit of Jetsons in here. Yeah, everybody can put on their imaginary TV glasses and get to work. Also, just think about, you know, when you've been making media, like how connected you were to your objects, how connected we all are to our objects now. You know, like we take these things with us into the bathroom. We're like tethered. So what's that going to look like in 21 years? And what's a positive version of the sort of addictive devices that we're currently engaging with? Heidi's got another one for us. Rise through meritocracy via anonymous application, like women getting into orchestras by their sound alone. Oh, okay, so a vetting process for media production that is that allows bias to be cut out of the process because of it's anonymous. That's cool. What else we got? We got the labor department's mandating imagination time. That's fun. We got a vital public service platform for responsible citizen journalism. That would be a relief. Got some community lending circles to fund emerging media projects. Okay, this is getting juicy, Rob.
Getting juicy. See where we're at.
I think I'm gonna think for a second about my smell question.
Go ahead. Yeah. If you could drop some in, that would sort of put like a nice accent to this whole thing. I mean, let me just while y'all are doing this, let me just pull out here. So this board is looking beautiful, and this is sort of an abbreviated special edition writers room, and we're perfectly on time, and we've got some really wonderful, juicy ideas here. This is really great.
So we've got some cinnamon scented truths and some garbage smelling propaganda.
Oh my God. Imagine that. Imagine if the algorithms optimized. So when someone's trying to drop in propaganda, suddenly you look at it and it would be abhorrent to you, right? Thinking the worse it was, the worse it smelled, to sort of work with our biological system. Did you come up with that just now, Jess?
I did.
Oh,
I was
love it.
thinking of
I love
my
it.
like childhood scratch and snip stickers.
Oh my gosh,
Next
you start
day.
reading something and
Next year,
as
make
you're reading it,
television
it starts
happen.
to smell. Oh,
Right,
yeah,
smell
what
of
a
vision.
smell.
Exactly.
Just imagine that. You started reading some conspiracy theory blog and it started to just smell like garbage. And you're like, oh
Yeah.
God. let me
Okay,
just-
okay, all right.
I'm
click,
good.
click.
I'm gonna, yeah, out of here, out of here.
I don't know who added this bit about the Misinformation Museum, but I love that.
Right, yeah, I like that too. Was that you, Rob?
That was, oh yeah, I sort of pulled it from one of the things, one of the cards above, but yeah, I'll take credit for it. Why not?
We've got
Considering
the
you
global,
did the smell of vision.
we got the Global Futures Institute housed in the Global South, influenced by in place and historically displaced Indigenous communities. Cool. Oh, that sounds good. All right, so are we about ready to make some characters?
We are, yes, exactly on point. We're about ready to make some characters.
Cool.
All right, so now we're going to move down. This may be a little bit awkward-ish because I think we're really gonna try to get some of the participants to sort of weigh in here, but this is popcorn. Down here below, number 6 is tell a story of one character who lives in this aspirational future. This is not like the protagonist of this future. This is not like the Neo from the Matrix of this future. This is just a person that lives in the future, right? Random person. And Jess and I are gonna alternate sort of calling folks out and having them just, whatever pops in your head, there are no wrong answers. This is just we have a lot of fun doing it. Generally, folks do. So I'll start just to break the awkwardness. I'm gonna say, we need a name. I'm gonna try to get somebody. Ethan, are you on camera? Are you on speaker? Can I get you to unmute yourself and answer one question? Going out to Ethan. Oh, yes.
Hear me?
Yes, Ethan. Ethan, what's up, my brother? Okay, so
Hi.
what is the name of our person? Name's fine. You're gonna name the person. Jess, would you mind typing it in, considering my dyslexia kicks in? Okay, Ethan, yeah, what's the name of our person living in this alternate 2041?
Male or female?
It's on
Or
you.
not.
Yeah, or not. Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. Just what's the name?
I'm trying to think of a gender neutral name.
Well, say it again.
Pat.
Pat?
Pat's fine. Pat. Hanging out with Pat.
What is Pat O'Ryan's personal mantra?
Personal mantra. Let's see, are we gonna get Maggie?
Maggie, you gotta unmute.
Dig in the dirt.
Dig in the dirt.
All right,
I
nice.
love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, this is beautiful. Okay, now we're going to, now remember, this person needs to be a maker. I forgot to say that.
Oh,
It's a
yes,
media
you're right.
maker in the future. Yeah, I'm glad I'm glad to get into that. Okay, it's a
Mhm.
media maker in our 2041. You know what? Let's do age first. Let's do age first. I'm gonna call out Sarah. If you're with us, Sarah, what is the age of Pat? Whose mantra is dig in the dirt. What is our, and if you're talking, you have to take it off of mute. What is the age of Pat? Kareem, give us an age. What's Pat's age?
I'm thinking 70. I'm picturing like a grandmother citizen journalist.
Oh, I love it. A grandmother citizen journalist at 70.
All right.
All right.
So then Izzy, hello. So what is Pat worried about?
Ooh, like which issues?
Yeah, in 2041, what is Pat worried about?
Insecure housing.
Ooh, there it is.
Okay.
I like it. All right, now we're going to move on to daily work, job. We use job, but it can't just be daily work. You know, I mean, maybe the idea of the job in 2041 is sort of an old concept. It's more like your daily work, what you like to do, how you like to serve. I'm going to try to get, let's see. Yeah, I think we're down to us now. That's fine with me.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, I'll get that. I'm going to try my friend Ethan again. Ethan, what is the job, the daily work of
What
Pat?
about Heidi? Isn't there a Heidi there?
Okay. Heidi. Yeah, Heidi, would you like to give us a job or a daily work? See if Heidi's going to join us and give us there we go.
A daily work would be fun if it was a choice of something different every day rather than the grind. And I am a citizen journalist and 70.
Oh, perfect.
Oh, there it
Welcome.
is.
Who needs a future? We're right here. We're here.
I'm in the future.
It's just unevenly distributed. All right, so do something different every day. Cool, but also, but a citizen journalist too, because that seems to be.
Yeah, and before you go, Maggie, why don't you also give us what is Pat's hobby? Let's do two right here. What is Pat's hobby?
Did you call it me?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Pat's hobby is bowling.
Bowling. I love it. I'm a horrible bowler. I strike
Alone
once
or
and then
together? All right, Alicia. What does Pat feel deeply about? You gotta unmute.
Yeah. Pat feels really deeply about lessons learned from gardening.
Well, I love that. I love that.
The double entendre of dig in the dirt.
Exactly.
Dig in the dirt.
Love
Yeah.
it. I love that.
Artistry. No. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's home and family environment. I'm gonna ask, does anyone want to drop in before I call like a home and family environment? This could be some sort of a co-op living situation, multifamily, could be polyamorous, could be anything you want in 2041. What is home family environment? And I'm going, if no one answers, I'm going to call on.
I think of it as an intergenerational household.
Oh, let's do it.
Lots of generations of the family in the same house.
All right.
What does first time action mean, Rob?
First time action. Can you hear me? Sorry, one of my headphones just dropped for a second. First time action is what they do the beginning of every day. Like what's the first thing they do when they meet someone or when they wake up? What's the first time action?
Sarah, are you back with us?
Hi.
Hi. Have you been following our character?
Not, I was away for a while, sorry.
Okay, that's okay. We can recap. So Pat Orion is a 70-year-old citizen journalist in 2041. They like to bowl, garden. They feel very deeply about lessons learned from gardening. They are 70. They live in an intergenerational household. In addition to citizen journalism, they like to do something new every day, just to keep it fresh. Their personal mantra is dig in the dirt. And the question for you, they're concerned about insecure housing, not for themselves, but for everybody. And the question is, what's the first thing they do when they wake up or they meet somebody? What's their first time action?
Water a plant.
Okay,
oh,
great.
I like it. Wow, that's great.
Cool.
So we're gonna stop it there. This is our character, Pat. We never determined gender could be completely fluid by 2041. Who knows? We'll leave that ambiguous. But that wraps our writers' room. So this is the board in just not even an hour. Look at all we created and imagined together in terms of we've rewritten history, we've designed for a better future, and we've created a character. Very interesting character. I'd love to hang out with Pat in 2041. And that concludes the writer's room portion of this session. And I'll give it to Jess for our next activity.
So we just wanted to wrap. We got another 14 minutes. We just wanted to wrap with some contemplation about this methodology. Like, did you like it? Does it work for you? Does it make you think about anything you could change about your work or about the way that you interact with media? And one of the reasons we do this, you'll see on the upper right-hand side of the board, there are design principles and actions required. So did this teach you any lessons or does it make you want to do something? Just wanted to see how this strikes you and whether you think it's useful.
I loved it. I've been hearing about, I like keep hearing this stuff, like the future, the architect in the future, and like, but this was my first writer's room. So I really liked it. I really liked these grids that you could just kind of like, without judging yourself before you have an idea, like just throw it up there. And then like also not really, and then pretty easily got out of like, you know, the way that maybe when you raise your hand in a room and you're like, I wonder if this is going to sound good or stupid and what people will think. Like I felt like that element was removed and made it really helpful.
Great. That's what we want to hear.
Mhm.
Alicia, how is this different from your process?
You know, one of the things I'm wondering, we've been working with folks a lot to generate future headlines and to write future memories towards those headlines and kind of how we got there. And we've used a variety of different processes, but not this one in particular. And so I'm just curious, kind of leaving this, of what other headlines and future memories would be generated, like if we took these things and wrote backwards, or took these things and turned them into speculative journalism and speculative reporting.
That's awesome.
That is.
What if Pat could report on this process?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. What if it was like interactive journalism? What if it was like augmented reality? That'd be so dope.
This is actually something I've been thinking about, is how do you, because we did a similar process called 20 Decades of 2020, looking at the beginning of the pandemic, looking 100 years forward and 100 years back. And then people wrote fictional stories out of that I've been editing, including Kareem. And Rob, thank you guys. But I've been thinking about, okay, well, that's fun. But it's still a flat thing on a page. I mean, although we're actually making like a cool interactive book, but still. So how could we use our talents as makers to create future artifacts? And actually Kareem's done some of this with what was that series called, Kareem?
With Future States?
Yeah, with Future States. So moving more into a film and TV mode, but also an AR mode, an immersive mode, a tangible object mode. So I'm part of this year's New Ink cohort, and that's one of the things I'm hoping to explore with some of those people.
Wow.
You know, how do we bring these objects to life? And we did actually extract an artifact. Oh, thanks, Kareem. Can you put that in the references section? We did actually extract an artifact out of each story for the 20 decades, but I want to see them. I want to hold them, you know? I want to pass those bills.
Jess, that reminds me of so Liberation in a Generation also does some future building work, and they have folks create some of these artifacts, and one that was created around the pandemic and around COVID was that was an edge cream, and it was COVID-19 edge cream, and that's where the cure for COVID was. And so it was the reason they did that is because, and so then somebody kind of created an edge cream, and they did it because they were like, only certain people, namely Black folks, know what edge cream is.
Right.
And so then it would like start there, and then other people would have to find out about edge cream, and it would be about community. And then like, that's how the cure for COVID would spread.
I have to get my edges in order.
Right. So when you mentioned artifacts, I was like, yeah, like that COVID edge cream. Like
yeah, totally. Yeah, at Sundance about 3 years ago, there was neurospeculative Afrofeminism. I think that's the right order of those words. Yep. They had created a virtual salon that had actual salon projects, and then there was an immersive experience where you went in and you got your brain reprogrammed to be more liberated as a Black woman in the mirror of the salon. And they had one of the things they had was a surveillance baffling kerchief that you could put on so the cameras couldn't see you. And yeah, I want to make that kind of stuff fun. I mean, I'm all about media, but you know, some sculpture would be fun too. What else strikes people from this exercise? Is there anything that you think relates back to your practice or back to the way that you think about what journalism should be or what it should do.
I want to call out my buddy Ethan again, if he's still around.
You formed a bond.
I know. No, well, it's interesting because, you know, these, you know, as you know, Jess and Kareem, you know, we started these live as a way, these writers' rooms, just for an internal thing for the guild, and they ended up very quickly becoming like an external thing. And we like, that's why these kind of conversations are really, you know, revealing to us or allow us to have insights. Like, for instance, we just wrapped the PCC writers' room, which was like a 6-7 writers' room.
Tell people what the PCC is.
Oh, Pop Culture Collaborative. They're designing for a more pluralist future, and they're brilliant at it. And when we first started, you know, there's a little bit of trepidation and, like, you know, not in a bad way from the team, is like, we've really thought about this, right? Like their PDFs are off the chain. Like, they have it, like their pitch is it's tight. Like it's like the face tight. But by the end, like we had our last session and everybody ended up in tears, like literally in tears, because, you know, in really imagining outside of just that structure, really actively in rooms imagining, they had sort of things that should have been obvious, they felt suddenly they had, and it was like it blew us away because we didn't think that was coming, you know. So, you know, these kind of practices they're amazing in a lot of ways for that, because it doesn't matter how much you've thought of something or spent time in your own head about, or even in groups, when you're trying to actively imagine for a better future, the more you've thought about it, the more new things you can kind of come up with that are more human centered, right? To where it's like what it feels like to be in that space. And the more time you spend there, the more your solutions or ideas are more based in who you are at a subconscious sort of, you know, almost spiritual level, but really in who you are. So this is really fun. I love doing this with all of y'all.
Well, you called Ethan out and then you didn't give him an assignment.
Yeah, I'm waiting to see what comes on. This is all my build up to the Ethan question. But I don't think he's back. Yes, Ethan, how was this experience for you?
I've been here all along.
How did it feel? Anything at all?
How did it smell?
I'm sorry, my brain's not really functioning right now.
That's okay.
Concentrating, so I feel like I'm going to take it all in when I watch it the second time.
Oh, that's fine. Right, go with that.
That's okay. That's a learning style.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Rob, we promised Izzy we were going to make a reality winner joke. What, you got one?
I don't.
Well, I think that the current media system makes us all reality losers. Sorry, it's late on Friday.
Actually, let me ask this.
That's pretty good.
We still have access to that documentary, right, through the portal for this. We do. Okay, good, because I wanted to watch it. So, okay.
Yeah. So apparently, the reality winner documentary was the talk of the town for this particular conference.
Yeah. And Jess, you thought already, you didn't see it yet, right?
I didn't see it yet, but it makes me think we should do like a future of whistleblowing futurist writers room.
Ooh. Wow.
Who can we get to pay for that? I think that would be, if we could get some real whistleblowers on with us, I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah, I know, right? Depending on who showed up and who paid for it, we could all end up in our own little reality situation, right?
Exactly. Depending on which secrets we're carrying.
Exactly.
All right, cool. Anybody else got any last thoughts they want to convey, or any futures they just came up with listening to all of us?
In that case, oh, please.
Wait, Sarah.
Please.
No, I was just going to say, to Ethan's point of feeling a little brain dead at 4:00 on a Friday after a rough week. Yeah. But I think looking at all of this, it makes you think. So like, I imagine, to your point too, Rob, about spending time with it and getting to know yourself and just thinking more and just taking time. I imagine this is a beginning of a process rather than an end, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm already like thinking a lot more about it now that I have these questions and the pressure is not on to like write something right there and then, you know?
No. And just to close it out too, I'll say that the interesting anecdote about imagination space is, one of the ideas when we first started doing this was, clearing out an imagination space. because, you know, I mean, like many of the greatest thinkers, philosophers, musicians, artists became great because they were bored, right? Like my niece is a brilliant singer, right? She's performed opera. She sucked like 3 years ago, right? And I'd watch her at the house. She'd play a little guitar and sing, and then she'd go do something else, and then she'd come back and do it. And when there's less to do, right? Like there's more, it forces you to go do something over and over again and get better. And so I remember like my 7-year-old Kareem, he loves theme park rides, like loves them, doesn't get scared, loves them. And he made me go to Universal. We had a pass because we live close there, like every other week to see if Jurassic Park had opened. And if you know Universal, you have to go all the way down to see. And I'd show him on my phone, it's not open. And he would just, well, let's go see, Daddy. He was like 5 at the time. And then finally one day it was open and we get on, and and at the end of it, he's a wreck. He's in tears. He's destroyed. And I couldn't figure out why. I thought it was the dinosaur. And he said, no. And I figured out why, because it was a new ride on the day that it opened and there was no video on it. And every other ride he'd ever been on, while we were in line, he watched the whole ride on video. I realized my son has never done anything without knowing what he was going to get into, which is a normal thing for us. It freaked him out. And I didn't even realize that was the space that he had never dealt with. Right. And it what just dinosaurs, whatever, just the idea of not having a pre-mental picture in his head and having to experience something in the moment wrecked him. Right. And it just reminded me, like, we don't even know the spaces that we're pushing ourselves out of right now. So this imagination space is ever more important for us to clear time to just imagine and think about things. Right.
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful process, you know, to take forward and keep doing. So it's great.
I'll let Jess close out too. But I just want to thank you for having us. Our advisors, like, your insights are gold, or time, because time is finite and it's even better than gold. So thank you so much for helping us out today. And Jess, would you like to say anything before we close out the session?
Hang on, I got to take a picture. I've been instructed to capture this moment, to capture this reality. Oops, I did it wrong. 1 sec. One more time. Okay, cheese. Thank you. Thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate you hanging in and coming up with stuff. And we're happy to keep talking. You'll find us on Medium. If you Google GOFA and Medium, you'll find us. I don't have the link in front of me. And I'm happy to talk more. I am at jessica@connectorstudio.com, or you'll find me online at .co-studio. So stay in touch.
Is there a way to save the board? Is the board being saved?
I already saved the board. Yeah. I'll email it out I'll send it to you, Jess, and I'll also send it to
Put a link in the chat.
Oh, well, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Actually. Let me I should have the link now. I started downloading it a while ago. All right.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Beautiful.
Have a good weekend, and we hope that your brain is sparkling a little.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
Thanks, Emma.